Connection with spirit is a true blessing, and I believe we all have the ability to connect. But with that connection comes responsibility, emotions, and a journey that on times can be both challenging and lonely. International medium, teacher and healer Martin Jones speaks openly about these challenges, but also the amazing power of healing and evidence of eternal love from loved ones who have passed over.
I mean, it sounds a little bit soppy really, but you can sit there developing in workshops all day and it's not going how you want it to do. But you bring someone's mother through and they feel that love and that connection, and just that look in the eyes, it's worth a million no's, And I do find with development that, or even working as a medium, we all have ups and downs, but when you need it, you get those experiences, and spirit help with that.
I'm Julian Jenkins, and you're listening to That's the Spirit. Martin is truly blessed to come from a line of mediums and spiritual lights. Surrounded by spirit from an early age, Martin's mother provided support and guidance as a fully dedicated medium. But wisely, she made him find his own spiritual pathway, a truly amazing and powerful story. We start at the beginning and Martin's first ever memories.
It's difficult to really pinpoint it. I was speaking to my mum a few months ago and asked, when did it all start happening? And she explained to me that when I was a kid, 4, 5, whatever, that I'd always see colours around people and know how they were feeling and things like that. And I completely forgot about that. And it was as soon as mum mentioned it, my mum's a medium, and as soon as she mentioned it, I got those memories back. But it was always, when I was a kid, just a natural part of growing up, really. So it would be very much like, mum, granddad's here or nanny's here and things like that. But then when I was about 18, I said, right, mum, I want to start training. I want to do the churches and I want to be a medium. And what my mum said was that she said, you're too young, boy. She said, live, travel, party, see the world, get some experience. And when she said that, I just knew I'd start properly developing in circles and things when I was 30. 10 years ago. So yeah, that's kind of, it's always been there, but it's really the last 10 years that I've really focused on my mediumship, and I've been working publicly for about 7.5 years now.
I suppose you were very, very lucky in terms of having your mother around you, and that was more of a transition. So there wasn't that, like a lot of people have, a spike, an initial blast from spirit, I suppose, then.
No, because it was always, I guess, so gradual, and there was never no bells and whistles about mediumship or the spirit world. It was just always a very natural part of life. It's very different, though, sitting there saying to your mum that your nan's there and, talking about things, to actually standing there with complete strangers. So it was different than I expected it to be. But yeah, as I said, I can't really pinpoint I can think of episodes in my childhood where I, saw a man standing by the window. I don't know who he was or why he was there, or, a few specific experiences or even dreams, but I couldn't really pinpoint exactly when.
I know that you've worked internationally, but there was also a point in your spiritual journey where you travelled down under in Australia and found your way there and into a spiritual family. Yeah,
so I was living in Sydney for a couple of years and I was having a great time, but then all of a sudden I felt a little bit down, a bit homesick and things like this, and it made me think, well, I want to find a spiritualist church. I'd been too busy partying until that point, living it up really, as a young person should. But then I went to a church called Enmore Spiritualist Church in Sydney. It's closed now, unfortunately, and it was the most beautiful place, one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. It was like a little cottage and all flowers outside. So I joined the circle there, and the teacher, Michelle, I wish I knew her surname, but I don't. She was an amazing medium and teacher. I didn't realize it was a trance circle, predominantly trance. And I remember sitting there in the first week, kind of just happy to be there. And there was a guy in trance, and I could just see a Native American glistening and white. It wasn't the image wasn't formed, but it wasn't. It was like physical, but you could see through it. But I was the only one who could see it. I could tell because nobody else reacted. So that was more clairvoyant, but it was very objective. And it was one of the most special things I've ever seen. And I kind of took it for granted that it would be like that every week. And obviously those things happened occasionally. But that circle was absolutely amazing.
I'm currently reading Gordon Higginson's book, and there is quite a few similarities, really, that, you know, Gordon's mum was a very famous and well-respected medium and helped develop him when he was younger. And, of course, your mother as well. And I think it's very wise that your mum sort of said, go on, son, go out and find your own way in life, because, you know, that was important. It was important for you to find where you were and what you were doing, really.
My mother completely refused to train me. And I was mortified. But she said to me, she said, look, you're my son. You don't listen to me anyway. Go and find your own way, and you have to find it for yourself. I was offended and probably very stroppy for a few weeks, but I got it years later, you know. And my mum knew that was best for me. So I sat in different circles, you know. You mentioned the Arthur Findlay College, beautiful place. Been on quite a few courses there. The one we went on was my first one for about 5 or 6 years. And just different workshops with mediums that I looked up to over the years, and residential courses. So that's really my training. As I said, I started developing at 30. I started doing the churches after about 2.5 years.
So tell me, when did you formalise? When did you really get to grips with spirit? And was there any other influences out there apart from your mother?
People say, when did your development start? So as you clearly asked, when did you formalise it almost? So it was then. But really, this beautiful gentleman here, Tom Davis, you can see him there in his healing coat. You know, when I was 17, 18, he would do psychometry with me. My mum and Tom taught me healing my mum when I was younger, and Tom when I was a little bit older, in my late teens. So it was always there, but it was that real decision, I'm going to go for this now, is when I was 30.
One of the things that I'd like to talk about really is the development and group development in particular circles. I run a circle myself now on a Monday. I'm blessed to have a really eclectic mix of people, but it is difficult to find the right circles and the right blend of energies, isn't it?
The thing is, with circles, it can be really hard to find a good circle. And as human beings, we can be so negative. There could be 12 lovely people, but we could walk away saying, I don't like that person, you know, and focus on the little negatives. And I think we all have a tendency to do that. And I say to people, you're not going to find a perfect circle. And if you do, you're very, very lucky. You know, I was fortunate that my mum was she was very known to the churches and things down here. So I kind of knew where to go, and I had a lot of support there and that guidance from my mum. So I found the training fun, you know, very difficult and very emotional, but I have fond memories, and I'm of course still training and developing.
People say to me, oh, it must be wonderful to be a medium and it must be amazing to do this. And it truly is. But there are times where, you know, you get chucked under the bus, or you feel under the mill, or whatever the scenario is. And it can be difficult sometimes. This path is sometimes a difficult one, isn't it?
I said to Spirit years ago, because I was quite upset. Someone was quite mean to me in a workshop, you know. And I thought, why do I do it? And I said to Spirit, you know what? I'll give you my time, my honesty, my love, my dedication. And let's just see what we can do together. So I always had the attitude, you feel as a medium, if you're going to go to someone now, I often work direct. Can I come to you, sir? Can I come to you? You know, and sometimes you know they're not going to be as open. But I always had the attitude that their nan's here with me, you know, and I'm not going to send her away. But as I've got more experienced, you really notice when someone's open and positive, it's often that you give them much better information and better evidence, and the message flows a little bit more. But you can't always have those people. So I think it's just about doing your best, really. And some people are a little bit difficult. I'll never forget, I was in Manchester, a church near Manchester, and I saw a little guy who was about 80 walking down with a lady, and I just thought, always going to be a really difficult one. So I'd given him a short message from his mum, and I said to him, "I've got your brother here, sir." And he went, "He's dead." And I was quite camp. I went, "No, but he's here. He's alive." You know, he went, "He's dead." And he just kept shouting, "He's dead." So it's just like, "Okay, sir, thank you. I think I'll move on now."
That can be hugely difficult, but how do you get around that? And did your experience, did your spiritual intuition help you along there?
If that had happened 3 or 4 years before, I think I would have just melted, you know. But again, people can be a little bit difficult. And I try and be understanding and think, well, they might be embarrassed, it's public, first time and things like that. But some people are just a little bit, you know, if there are any working mediums here, you'll all know when you got that person basically saying, "Go on then, kid, impress me," you know, and it's not the most pleasant, positive light energy to work in sometimes. I just do my best, really, you know.
The thing with demonstrations as well, I believe, is that it's not all linear, and we're talking and working with emotions. So sometimes people can take it and afterwards they'll come up to you and ask you questions. But, you know, it can be difficult, and it is having that ability to be able to do the demonstration. And then, if you like, leave your work there, because otherwise it can all get a bit too much, can't it?
You know, people have come up to me. I always remember at Lewisham Church, a lady come up to me after and said, you know, that was my dad. And she said, it was just a bit emotional for me to take it in public. You know, very nice of her to come and speak to me. And bless her, she said, "But I'm telling you because I didn't want to take him home with you." And it's like, it was very sweet, but I've got my own life, you know. And often people will kind of, when you see them again, say, "Oh, I could take that message, but I don't remember it." And I try my best to have the attitude is, once that episode of mediumship is done, it's done, you know, and then just try and let go of it. And I try and what's very important to me is not mediumship for not all of my identity not to be based on my mediumship, you know, and because we all need positive regard from other people. We all need compassion and people to be nice to us. And if that's all just too much based on the mediumship, it's too up and down emotionally. So I try my best to have the attitude that I try my absolute best and just accept how it is and leave it there and move on. So, as I said, afterwards, I've often forgotten anyway a lot of the information.
A lot of that development and help and closure of doing demonstrations, etc., can be helped and influenced by our guides. I'm very fortunate to have, you know, 3 or 4 guides that I work with. I have one in particular. I've mentioned him a few times on here, the native Indian from Ottawa. His name's Rotag, and he helps me a lot. But one of the questions I want to ask is about guides. And I know a lot of people get hung up over, you know, they don't see their guides or they have a guide, or, you know, and I know sometimes I think that the want and need to have a guide and find that guide, I think sometimes can stifle the development and actually, you know, stall it, if you like. I think some of these things just run naturally, and that's hugely important for me.
It was very important for me. I was aware of guides as a child, and when I started to want to do the work, you know, it was very important for me to know who my guides were, and I would talk to my guides all of the time. Shen, a Chinese gentleman, is one of my best friends over there. And when I started, it was very, very important to me. And, you know, encircle lots of guided meditations with guides and things like that. It seemed to become, to say less important sounds disrespectful, but over the years, I don't think about guides or talk to my guides as much. I always remember a medium many years ago saying to me, "I don't know who my guides are, but they love me and I love them and I trust them." And it always stuck in my mind. So I just think that at the beginning, exploring guides and different people that love and protect us and help us is so fascinating. But as I've developed and do more mediumship, I focus more on the mediumship than thinking about the guides as much. What I thought was interesting, I did a few dems in Wales 3 or 4 years ago. And the last one, I just knew it was going to be a good dem. And I was standing outside smoking, as I often do before I work, and I was aware of Shen and really could feel his presence. And I jokingly said, where have you been for the last couple of years? But he said to me very clearly, he said, I had to leave you a little bit so you could learn more about mediumship. Now you have learned more, I can come back and start working with you a lot more. And the reason I knew that was a real experience is, A, because I could feel it, but it went against the grain of what I'd been taught, So, as I said, guides, I just feel when people are going into it, it's often that feeling of support and friendship with the spirit world and that personal identity that they can connect with, But yeah, so as I said, I love my guides. My nan, like Tom, is, one of my guides. My nan, Tom wasn't my biological grandfather, and Marjorie was a grandmother, but she wasn't biological. She works really closely with my mediumship as well, but they worked with it their whole life. So again, my family up there also work with me a lot as well.
So we've all got our spiritual team, but do you believe then it is hugely important for somebody to get to know and understand and have that relationship with their guides? I personally do think it is, but what's your views?
I think it depends on the individual, because I was adamant I wanted to know who my guides were. So it was, I've never demanded anything from the spirit world, but that was one of the things. There's only one other, and that was to do with my work as well. So yeah, I just think that people are so individual. If people are really scientific and, look at a lot of quantum physics or consciousness and things like this, or the, collective unconsciousness, then they might feel from that more scientific perspective that it's just connected minds, energies and things like that. And, the spirit guides, it comes more from that spiritualism side. And there were some wonderful guides. I was looking at a Silver Birch book the other day, beautiful. But I think it just really depends on the individual. So what I'm trying to say, if someone comes into it more from a metaphysics angle, they might not be interested. But if someone's coming up the traditional church route, they will become much more interested. But I do think it's something we can't force too much, because we've got to be a little bit careful that our own imagination doesn't create things that we want to see.
I briefly said that, I've got a couple of guides I work with at the moment, but some people say there's lots of people. We're certainly not on our own delivering these messages, are we?
Yeah. Marjorie was good friends with a wonderful trance medium, Lillian Bailey. And Lillian, she was having a trance sitting with Lillian, and Lillian said to her there were about 80 people there. And she used the analogy that, if you send a letter, one man delivers that letter through your letterbox, but there's dozens and dozens of people that work at the post office, the sorting office, and all of these people. So we often think of that one person, but it's so many different guides helping in their own different ways. And, I feel in some way, well, it's all about the blending of energy, isn't it? So I just feel when I can see in my mind as I'm talking, there's lots of guides that have the ability to change the vibrations, and collectively, I think portal is the wrong word, isn't it? But I just think a team of guides often are in the background making it all possible, most of which would go unnoticed. But they don't need thanks and praise, do they? It's about service.
So your guides, and I know you mentioned, Shen, etc. Are you aware that they're always around you? Are they always working with you at the forefront, really?
I used to feel I was in much more of a dialogue, but now sometimes I'm aware of Shen with me, but not so often, if I'm honest. It doesn't mean he's there. I can feel him now and he loves me. But I guess it's not so much if they're there, it's where our focus is on, isn't it? And my focus just hasn't been on communicating with my guides much for a few years. Maybe it will change. Maybe this conversation will inspire me. Who knows? But that's how it's been for the last while.
One of the questions I always get and always find sometimes difficult to answer is is how do we stay in the energy? How do we accept taking the no's? How do we ensure that, and I keep talking about at the moment, is, passing our human, putting our human to one side and creating that open space, whether you're using mindfulness or the power meditation technique that I talk about. But when we get that no, or we get that energy whereby it doesn't feel right, how do we stay in the power? How do we stay in the connection? And because we are only human after all, aren't we?
I mean, that's something I'm really looking at the moment, because I just feel that's very important. We're human beings. Our mind will often, until we get right to the end of our journey, I believe, be very much involved. And it's not reacting to too much. When we start doing mediumship no's, we all get no's, they can throw you so much. But again, it's not being attached to the outcome so much. And just, for me, what I learned could happen with me, you've got a lovely person here in the spirit world, and you're feeling them, you're communicating with them in different ways with your senses. But then you can then lose that link to focus on the audience. What they're thinking, how they're reacting, they look bored, they look happy, whatever. So for me, it's just been reminding myself to just gently bring my awareness, to the spirit world. But I also believe, the more we work, the more experienced we get, we can stay in that energy more. And that translates to lots of things, not just mediumship, doesn't it? So again, it's just, I think the simplicity of not being too attached to the results, and then reminding myself to bring my awareness back to the spirit world, and as we discussed before the podcast, the recipient can make a lot of difference. If they're open, they're happy to be there, and there's love being felt, the mediumship can come out a lot smoother. When somebody's very close, it's a little bit more difficult. So again, I think it's just experience, but a very long answer to this question. It's just about, for me, bringing my awareness back all of the time and not thinking too much about.
For me, the ability to stay in the power has a lot to do with the connection within yourself. So, your soul self and your heart center, being able to refocus, being able to understand when you get those no's or you get an interruption, that you can go back to spirit, you can call spirit to come close again and work with that. That's important, isn't it? When
you're really in that power, in that zone, it's just coming through anyway, and to be that connected and just let the mediumship work through you. Technically, the more someone could do that, the less they'd have to do that. But when I've not been feeling I've been getting enough information, I've tried it, and sometimes it's worked really well, and for me sometimes it hasn't worked, but that would often be because I've done that when the energy has dropped a little bit, but I heard someone say it a few years ago, but it really works for people. So no, it's really helpful, I think.
Just quickly back onto the guide side of things, really, that some people have asked the question, I don't seem to be working with my guide at the moment. Has he gone? Have they left me? I don't feel so connected. What would you say about that?
I do believe they'll always be there in some capacity, but the more you're in that experience, the more you're living that experience, the guide often wouldn't want you focusing on them. They want you to do what they almost be invisible in the background, and you're giving all the information. So if you look at it logically, even if you're giving a good reading to someone, sometimes if your mind is going back to the guide, it can be really helpful, and they can, maybe that medium, their guide tells them the information and they deliver it, from the person in the spirit world. But as I said, I like, and I'm working towards just letting go and letting it happen. But we're all analytical, so it's not so easy sometimes.
If there was one thing you would talk about that can help you develop or can hinder you, what would that be?
Patience. We're always learning. You and I have been mediums for some years, but we're never happy with where we're at because we always want to be a lot better. Just patience. And I just think that I learned from my own experience there wasn't enough balance in my life, because all my holidays, everything was all about mediumship courses. And what happens is there's too much expectation for your happiness in your life to come from that. and it's too demanding and it's too attached, I believe. So just to take it as it comes, try not to be too hard on yourself and enjoy it. You know, of course, there's times where we want to be better than we are, and it's hard. But if you love it and you enjoy it, you know, it makes it more manageable, those difficult times when you go to that workshop and you don't feel you had a good day.
When we start this journey, we can all get very excited and want spirit to overtake our lives and constantly be talking and linking and doing readings, etc. But what is important is balance, isn't it? It's about being Julian Jenkins, the physical being, and Julian Jenkins, the spiritual medium being, if you like. And it is about finding that harmony and balance, isn't it?
It's human nature, you know, to want to excel, to want to be good at things, to feel special, to feel important. So we've got so many needs as human beings. And I just feel that if we're aware not to try and get all of those positive feelings from mediumship, then it makes it a smoother road. You know, I don't know if that makes sense or how relevant that to the question that is, but I've just learned from, you know, watching people and myself that if our whole persona is as a medium, then people can get a little bit not always the nicest people they could maybe be.
Martin Jones is an international medium who has worked all over the world. His thoughts and beliefs and the way he conducts himself, for me, are truly spiritual. A very blessed man, and I'm really lucky to call him my friend. What a wonderful podcast. What a wonderful ending. I'm Julian Jenkins, and you've been listening to That's the Spirit.